model-driven platform for automation transformation. You've been at this 30 years, Denis. You're as old as the rest of us. We've all been doing this much too long. Gary Hallmark. Gary's been working in business automation for decades as well. He's an automation architect with Oracle. Somehow he managed to spend his time building research prototypes for sort of next-gen cloud native infrastructure, generative AI, large language models, object storage. As far as I can tell, whatever Gary feels like playing with, he gets to play with, which sounds like a fabulous job. He previously chaired the DMN committee, which is a much less fabulous job.
That was great.
Joined also by Stefaan Lambrecht. Stefaan's been working in business architecture, process innovation for 3 decades as well. His focus is on operational excellence in financial sector, bringing decision process and case modeling together for both compliance and customer-centric performance. I love that combo. It's often people think compliance is an alternative when it's not. He's the founder of Tripod for Operational Excellence and really focuses on helping organizations thrive in very complex regulatory environments. Guilhem Molines from IBM has been involved with decision technology for a couple of decades here, focuses on knowledge modeling, the business user experience, and working with users and practitioners to make it easier to author and manage business decisions. He's the chief architect for one of the decisions products at IBM, and has also had a chance to play with some fun projects. One of my favorites is the Mayflower autonomous ship, which sailed last summer and I think is about to take another trip this summer. And then alphabetically last but not least, Carlos Serrano-Morales. Spent a big chunk of his career in AI, analytics, decision management, business roles as well. Worked in Europe, including for the Space Agency, and then joined Neuron Data. Worked on an expert system, Blaze Advisor, and has been involved in business roles since the very early days. He was responsible for all the decisioning technologies at FICO, and then co-founded Sparkling Logic, where he's responsible for Smart's their decision management platform. So these are a crowd of folks who have spent literally decades thinking about how one builds, manages, and uses decisioning products. So any question you might have about decisions, you should totally ask them. Other questions, perhaps not. But anything about decisions, you absolutely can totally ask these guys, no problem. So I have a couple of pre-canned questions that were just to get people warmed up. So we're going to do this alphabetically and then reverse alphabetically because I have 2, right? So the first question then is, let's think about the end user experience. So by that, I mean someone who is the victim, if you like, of a decisioning system. So they're applying for a loan. The loan decision's being made. They've got a claim. They're filing a claim. They are being made an offer based on a marketing system that's a next best action decision system. So some kind of decisioning system is impacting them. How is their experience, does the panel think, going to change as people ingest AI and bring AI to bear and large language models to bear on these systems and their immediate environment? Or is it all going to be under the covers as far as this customer is concerned? So what's going to be different if you are someone who might be impacted by decision applications in a world where AI infuses those or replaces or updates those systems? And so I'm looking for sort of some thoughts from each of the panelists. And we're going to go in alphabetical order. So that means, Alan, you're first, and then we'll follow with Denis and Gary, and we'll go through the alphabetical by last name for those of you who are being persnickety.
Okay, thank you, James. In your notes for this, you asked a sort of a sub-question, which is what I wanted to hone in on, which is how should we decide on the boundaries of authority between people and automation and AI? Well, I just want to pick on that because it sort of goes to the heart of the issue. Because when it comes down to it, all authority is human. Only humans can be held responsible for decisions made by the platform. Only humans can be responsible for answering an irate end user when things go wrong. And that's not going to change. Humans delegate responsibility to automated decisioning systems because they feel they can trust them. And they can only do that if they're deterministic and comprehensible, right? And we've had a number of people on the conference so far all agreed that LLMs can't be used for deterministic decisions yet. So I'm not going to argue about that. But I think what I'm interested in is comprehensibility, because that's the basis for justification, explanations, and so on. The reason that decision systems are comprehensible when they are is that they're based on human concept models. And especially in this forum, decision structure as defined in DMN, but also concepts like user roles and business processes, business intent, data structure, the way we define, where we divide the world up into objects that have properties. Because these concepts, like the idea of a decision and the idea of a step in a process, are so natural to us, we tend to forget how crucial and fundamental they are. So they provide the structure on which all our decision logic is based, executed and understood. So I expect AI will not be used directly for decision execution in the near future. But we all tend to assume that LLMs should be used for providing a natural language interface with the decision systems. But the real point I want to make is that will only work if the LLMs we use respect the end user's concept model. In other words, they understand the world in the same way that the user does. And so there are dangers in adopting a general purpose LLM off the shelf, right, based on some large corpus of text. We must design the concept model which is going to underlie our interaction with the end user by carefully selecting a focus corpus of text which we know is in line with the goals of our system and the needs of our users. So that's
okay.
My contribution.
No, I see. Yeah, so if there's no point in having a chatbot talking to my back-end banking systems if it doesn't think, or if it doesn't understand what a bank is, right, in some fundamental way, right? I'm reminded of a famous comment someone once made to me many years ago. They said, "There's only one kind of error in computer systems, and it's a human error. It's just a question of finding out which human it was."
Very true.
All right, Denis, you're up next. What's your thinking on this topic?
Everything Alan said. No.
We're doing it the other way around next time, Denis, so I reserve the right to do the same.
Exactly.
Yeah. I guess what I'm saying is I'm echoing a lot of what Alan just mentioned. I've been saying here at DecisionCAMP for the last few years, ever since ChatGPT came about, that I thought generative AI is not an AI revolution, but a user experience revolution. And I think this is becoming more and more obvious to many of us in the field. Certainly, the generative AI model, and I'm specifying generative AI because we don't know what AI means nowadays. So generative AI certainly gives us a sense of adaptability when it comes to interacting with the system. So whether we do things like what I presented earlier of providing deterministic DMN model or process model to the large language model as a tool so that we know that they're doing deterministic decisioning, but offer a more adaptive type of interface and interaction. Professor Gupta just presented basically the same notions of providing a more adaptive interface. But I think, as mentioned by Alan, trust and explainability will become more and more the main point of discussion. Right. We've seen data of how many failures there are, and most of the failure are not because of the technology. Most of the failure are trying to provide a solution without a problem. People want.
I built a great AI system, and you should use it.
Exactly, and so I think we're going to go back more and more to the core of truly understanding what the problem is, what the nature of the problem is, and then use the right technology to solve the problem. And as we progress to disappearing AI is a big factor. I mentioned it. There's a lot of technology that in the 80s was quite amazing AI that today is just low-level feature in the operating systems. And the same with the device now. The fact that you can take a picture on your phone, touch one of the person, and it will tell you which person it is that the picture is about, we take it for granted. So as we progress, this adaptability, this flexibility disappear. But as we want to enter this into the enterprise realm, I find that things don't change that much there. Just like it's hard to guide an organization, when you're leading an organization, making sure that the vision is achieved and the mission is actually taken by the employees. We all know that getting your employees to talk of a single voice and a single mind model to the external world is a very hard thing to do. That's not going to change with machine. We still have to make sure that they're representative. Otherwise, at the end, there's only going to be one company because all the systems are going to narrow down to that same solution. So,
very big gulp, yes.
Exactly. So we have to differentiate the value in the systems and the rules and how we present the value we bring to the system. And I think that's core to it. I like to think that I'm more pragmatic. I'm not a big fan of the AGI conversation myself. I think it's been diverting a lot of the attention to things that are not necessarily as important. Another comment too, maybe on the way, is that a lot of people talk of something like ChatGPT and Claude as if it was a large language model. It is not. The large language model is a very small piece of this overall scaffolding that's around, that can intake words, document, that can chunk the word document, reparse it, has memory capabilities that can bring back and inject in the context. So there's a lot of things there. We're talking about neurosymbolic system, but these purely neural network type of system are not really that. They're scaffolded with all kinds of
There's all sorts of stuff. Yeah, right. Yeah.
And I'll stop there.
All right. Gary, you're normally good for a controversial point of view.
Oh, how many do you want?
Just one. Just one. Save one for later. Yeah.
So, okay, I mean, I guess one of the questions was, what's the user experience? How's it going to change, right, with AI? So I think, existing high volume operational decisions, LLMs are too slow for that anyway, right? So, I mean, I think my loan is, presumably if you're bankrupt, your loans are still going to be denied. Maybe you'll find out about it a little bit faster, with with the rejection letter coming on your iPhone, if you can afford that, or your Android, rather than in the mail. But, I don't know that anything is going to be super different there, but, there aren't that many fully automated decisions, right? And so maybe, the AI will help to automate some of the, ones that have not been on the list for full, automation. I've been looking at medical decisions, for instance, right? And that's, very interesting. You have to be very careful, obviously. Patient safety is involved. So, maybe in certain areas it's going to be profound. Certainly will be profound, I think, more maybe than the user experience, but, actually helping doctors with the decision support. They have these 200-page charts, 90% of which are just repeatedly summarizing what the last doctor summarized when he looked at the 190-page chart, right? And it goes back and back. And so, so I think, there could be a lot of use there, and, existing decision models, if you have them, or bits of this that are automated, that'll be great. Those can be tools for the LLM to use, and that will help ground it and help it, and it can kind of maybe be the process that kind of goes around and uses these tools but who are we kidding, right? I mean, in many organizations, I think I may work for one. There's not a lot of belief in fully automating decisions, right? I mean, the automation that you see in an approval system is figuring out how many vice presidents do you need to sign off on this particular decision, right? Yes. Not particularly even helping to make the decision or surfacing the criteria, but just routing it to their mailbox, right? And that's kind of the level of automation you see. And so as long as orgs are sticking to this kind of model, then it goes back to, I think, what Alan is saying, what Denis is saying. If you really need like an officer of the corporation to take responsibility for this decision, then you kind of give it to them up front and make them check something off.
The human airbag approach to this kind of thing, right? It's just
right.
Right. And to your point about speed, it always baffled me to see people doing 1+1 on ChatGPT.
Do
you know how much energy you waste for something we can do at the bit level in the computer?
I know.
There's a certain amount of humor around here in I live in Silicon Valley, where it's how much VC money can I waste today by asking ChatGPT to do addition for me? All right, Stefaan. You look like it's cold wherever you are.
Fall is really coming in at high speed, so it's rather cold. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. When I read your question from an end user perspective, that part, it made me laugh a little bit because it reminded me of Michael Hammer re-engineering the corporation, in which he said, the only industry apart from IT calling its customers a user is drugs trafficking. And it tells a lot about IT, obviously. And okay, to answer the question, I think AI is being used already quite a lot in financial industry, for instance. If we talk about determining credit ratings for business corporations or something like that, AI is heavily used already. So it is possible to use AI, but not for the complete decision. If we talk about automated decisioning, and I think also if an end user, someone asking for a loan or someone handing in an insurance claim in the insurance company is confronted with automated decisioning, it doesn't matter for that end user whether that is artificial or deterministic. The reaction will be a little bit the same. It's avoiding the system says no thing from Little Britain. And certainly and it depends also on the type of customer. If a business-to-business customer there you have much more liberty to apply automated decisioning to handle that with also all potential data. If we're talking about end consumers, also privacy comes in there. And if an end consumer requests a loan, for instance, there are some limitations and also some legal aspects to be looked at in terms of what data can you use. In the financial institution I'm working for instance, they use pseudo-social networks to solve that problem. Because, for instance, if they would analyze your bank transactions and see that you pay a lot at casinos, then they know that you gamble a lot. So that might be a negative thing when granting a loan to you. Only you cannot use that kind of data.
Right.
Because so that is a problem in itself. So it's also a matter of, okay, what kind of data can you use in what kind of context and in which circumstances? So it's much more about, the things that you're allowed to do. And then also, in to what degree do you need to explain why, for instance, you don't grant a loan to someone? For instance, if it's about compliance, it's even forbidden for a bank, here, certainly here in Europe, to explain why they don't grant a loan to someone. Suppose you're in money laundering or in financing terrorist activities. You cannot tell your customer, we don't grant you a loan because you're in money laundering or in whatever illegal activities. You must be silent about that. You must report it to the regulator, and then something can happen, but you cannot tell. So in that respect, you can also hide the reasons why you are not granting a loan. So in that respect, there is less limitation to what you can do with automated decisioning or with AI, etc. But it all comes back to one thing. It's automated decisioning, whether it is artificial or not. It's all about implementing the policies and regulations of an organization towards its customers. And that's the only thing it should do. Because the end responsibility, as it has already been said, is always with humans, with managers, with directors in a company, and they are responsible for whatever they do.
Right. All right. Guilhem. And you're on mute, so there you go. You're not now.
Yes, I'm back. So I want to echo the first thing that Alan said about trust. I think it has to do, the user experience has to do with trust. We have one of our researchers who performed some work that was actually published as an article where he was examining, looking at the difference in the machine taking the decision alone, the human taking the decision alone, or a combination of both taking the decision alone. And you would think that the latter would be the most efficient, since the human would catch up the mistakes of the machines. And in fact, it's not. It's not always. And what he found out is that when the machine has a high confidence and is taking a decision with a high confidence, that the human just has to validate, confirm, or infirm the response of the human, is this transaction fraudulent, yes or no? And by the way, this is what the machine suggested. The response of the human tends to degrade the overall performance of the system for some range of confidence. That is, when the system, when the machine is highly performant, yes, it's a fraudulent transaction, I know it for sure, like 95% sure, or I just don't know, my confidence is 50%, then the human acting on that, either seeking extra information or confirming or infirming what the machine said, is usually degrading the performance of the machine. And there's a sweet spot in the middle where the performance of the machine is good or good enough, but not that great, like 70–80% kind of confidence, where adding the human on top of it is making sense and is producing a greater quality of decisions. And this, when you look at it in detail, when you look at the article and look at the numbers, it doesn't quite add up. It's not math. It's a matter of human factors. It's a matter of if the human trusts what the machine says. If the machine is generally right, then the human is going to try to find ways to say, oh, this must be wrong, because the machine cannot be right all the time, and ends up degrading the performance. If the machine is generally not right, then the human is trying to seek additional information and may be better than the machine, but when you average it all out on a range of transactions, the performance of the combination is degraded unless you're in the sweet spot.
Right.
I think that finding was very interesting, because when we tend to think about automation, we're all engineers, we're all writing software, and we want to write software that is doing the thing right. So when we write decision with rules, like we've done for years and years, we have a high level of confidence that the software we wrote is actually designed to implement the policy that the regulator wrote and will yield to a predictable outcome, and that adding the unpredictability of those new models in the mix is going to be a nightmare. But in fact, sometimes it just turns out that the fact that you mix the human and the machine is a nightmare, because the human doesn't trust the machine. Right. So, and the reason I'm saying that is, in the end, we used to say for years and years, the system has to be predictable, has to compute the same decision all the time for the same input, has to be trustable. And to be trustable, it needs to be repeatable. And because now we have this mix of models that are not as repeatable as they used to, the need for explanation becomes even more important, because it's probably better to issue a recommendation. And I'm speaking recommendation, not talking compliance, auditability, but to issue a recommendation that is not completely right, but explainable, than a recommendation that would be better, but not explainable. So I think that's really where we need to work these days in terms of user experience, not just spit out a decision with a confidence factor, but also be able to explain those decisions. I agree with Stefaan, it may not trickle down to the final users, right? Like, you're a terrorist is not something a bank would say to their users. But at least to the testers of the automation, that is, all the first users of that automation, so that they can trust it, and maybe sometimes even go back and audit what decision was made. So the human factors is quite important.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think there's some interesting tension, right? And Denis, I'm sure, knows as well as I do that there's in Canada, there's now at least one province with a law on the books that says if you are negatively impacted by an automated decision, you can demand an explanation. You can say, you have to tell me what data you used and how you decided with that data, because I was negatively impacted by it. And one of the interesting debates I had with the bank was, well, they're like, well, we always manually review negative results. Therefore, we're not covered by this. And I'm like, if I'm applying for a mortgage on a Friday late, because there's a house I want to buy over the weekend, and you say someone has to talk to you and defer that till Monday, I'm negatively impacted by the automated decision that you needed to review that. So, no. Simply having a human, referring it to a human sometimes doesn't get you out. It's still an automated decision to refer it to a human that could still negatively impact people. So, yeah, you have to pay attention to this stuff. This explanation stuff, I think I'm with you. It's going to be very important. All right, Carlos, you get to wrap up this one.
Oh,
if there's anything left to say.
Right? If there's anything left to say. So I'm going to go back to a little bit of a more pragmatic and down-to-earth thing. AI, I mean, somebody in the meeting has already said, in the panel has already said it. AI defined, generally speaking, as models in general, basically things that are not explicitly written down. A very bad definition of AI, but the operating one that covers predictive models and LLMs. Right. Predictive models have already been there and been used in systems for a long time. So when we say automated decisions, they are predictable, but they're predictable within the variations of what those predictive models, quote unquote, already allow for. But there's already a ton of tooling, a lot of technology, a lot of know-how on how to make sure that on average, so not necessarily for a single individual transaction, but on average, we are predictable and the decisions are repeatable, etc. And we've done our best as technology providers to hide exactly how it gets done from the end user. The end user in general doesn't know and shouldn't know. LLMs change the picture a little bit, and I'm going to say two things at the very beginning. So first, a large language model is a model of a language. It's not a model of reality. And that's the key problem, is that essentially when we are trying to use these LLM technologies as decisions by themselves, basically let the LLM decide, we are betting on the fact that language represents reality. And that's a big if. I mean, we can get all philosophical on that, and quote I don't know how many German thinkers on the fact, but the reality, it's not true. I mean, a language by itself, it's a compressed view of reality, something that is used in order to communicate the reality from one place to another, but it's lossy.
Right, I'm going to kill you for that.
Why? Yeah.
No, I'm just going to say.
Yeah.
I'm obviously not, in fact,
going to
kill you.
Yeah. Well, you are within reach. So that being said, I think that fact in some form is understood by people who will develop these systems. And what we've seen, or what we see in the marketplace or in our customer base, is actually a pretty large adoption, or upcoming adoption of LLMs that will impact the end user experience, and they are. I mean, again, it's very obvious what I'm going to say, but I think it bears saying it. Anything that has a communication with the end user, and it's not just the text that comes back and forth, but which format, which tone is being used to communicate in both directions. Basically, can I detect when the person is talking to me on the phone? Can the system detect that the person is under stress, which means that I need to, treat that person in another way, or the person is under stress and I need to provide that person with an answer that is, phrased in a certain way or through a certain medium that a certain channel that will allow to reduce that stress. So all those aspects, the LLMs are very good at. Again, because what they are doing is they're basically detecting those things at the language level, and language is the way through which we convey that. And I use language in general terms. But the second aspect, and this is more controversial, and we are seeing this happening, is essentially the emergence of something akin to self-service case management or self-service support. Self-service case management is actually quite intriguing, in the sense that that basically means that your user is no longer bound by the limits of the workflow that you define in advance, or by the limit of the web screens that you define in advance, or even by the limits of the pre-canned chat responses that you define in advance. You are basically letting the LLM not do the decision, and this is the key one. It doesn't do the decisions. However, it processes the information and it goes and fetches the information that it needs to answer on tools that themselves are coded with other technologies and agents and that kind of stuff. That we're seeing. So what I think we are seeing is that basically, and again, this fits the same patterns that all the analysts are talking about of the different iterations of AI agents. I'm not saying anything new, but we are actually seeing it happening. It has the advantage that most of these areas has human response times. So I'm actually getting faster service as an end user than a human typing on the other side, and are not that much constrained by legal requirements. The other area, so you asked a question on boundaries, and where that was a very complicated question because it depends on who's the one allocating the money. Because at the end of the day, a corporation is no corporation that I know of really works for the benefit of humanity. They want to maximize their profit or their growth, and they want to minimize their risk. So they're going to allocate the money accordingly. It's not going to happen in the short term on purely automated straight-through processing decisions, and it's not as much a factor of the technology. It's a lot of factor of cost. They're extremely complicated to implement. If you only implement in LLM or significant in LLM, you don't get the predictability that you need unless you do a lot of work. You have to hire PhDs that you're actually you're fighting in the hundreds of millions of dollars to get them. And lastly, they cost a huge amount of money to actually run. But I do think that, on the other hand, for as I said, the case management stuff, the common knowledge worker is going to be displaced in favor of LLMs. You will see what's happening in software development, quote unquote, where you have a cast of very good programmers supported by a multiplied, if you want, by the usage of LLM, and the common knowledge workers sort of being displaced, at least in roles, not necessarily as people, but in roles. And I do think that in terms of allocating money to development of the decision management systems, and this leads into the second question, it's going to be money will go to LLMs quite significantly as a mechanism to support the work of your experts, of your expert decision guy, who's going to use decision management tools, however, accelerated or multiplied in terms of his or her capacity by the usage of LLMs. I mean, it's all pretty trivial, but pretty real.
Yeah, no, right. I mean, it's an interesting transition there, because obviously we're going to go to that question next, which is how do we see these tools being used to drive change in the way we build these systems. And one of the interesting questions when I watch the way some companies are responding to use of LLMs in programmers is there's this definite pressure on junior programmers, right? That the people don't want to hire them. And the question is, well, how do you get senior programmers if you don't hire any junior programmers? Right? I mean, we in the rules industry watched this, right? We went through a sort of a winter, right, where we didn't really have any new people coming in. And so look at the panel. We've all been doing this 30 years. You know? And there are gaps where the industry was not pulling new people in. And I worry that and companies too are going to find the same thing. Oh, I can use LLMs to support my cast of experts. But then I stop producing experts.
Yeah. I think it's the skill set that will change for junior people in general terms. So the skill set that was rewarded in the past is, do you know this, and can you use this tool or this series of tools? The skill that gets you through now with LLMs is, are you able to ask the right questions? Are you able to analyze? Are you able to interact? So basically the social skills. You as opposed to becoming a really good software developer and solve the libraries, you're actually becoming a software developer who could be a product manager or who could be a business analyst. I mean, somebody who asks the right questions or asks the wrong questions to get, asks the right question or gives the wrong answer to get the right answer. I mean, that kind of stuff. So basically, more of the critical spirit, and that's a challenge for the education system in many places. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So it's like when the people say, "Oh, these LLMs can pass all these exams," and I'm like, "Yes, that's because the exams were stupid in the first place." But that's a separate problem, as they say. All right. So we're gonna go follow on this thread, because this is the other thread we wanted to touch on, which was how do we see large language models, generative AI, really impacting the way people build decisioning systems, or indeed perhaps systems more generally. And Carlos obviously has been touching on this. So in the interest of time, I'm gonna take that as Carlos's second answer, unless he wants to add anything.
No, you can't really bypass me on that one.
No, I'll give you a chance to say something, Carlos. But I also want to before you do, I want to point out that we have a great question from Jasper here, pointing out that one of the challenges with decision models are great. And I think many of us are big believers in decision models, right? But when you have a lot of material to turn into decision models, it can be intense. It can use a lot of time on the part of experts and people who know this stuff and everything else. And so one of the questions is, well, can you use generative AI? Can you use large language models as part of analyzing and understanding those policies and so on, so that you can get to decision models more quickly? And I think this is an area that pretty much all the vendors on this call are investing in, and what our experience is. So I thought as we go through the answers, we can all sort of add our 2 cents, because I think that's an interesting sort of point to make sure we touch on as we go through. So obviously, I'm winding you up. You do in fact get to answer the question in a second.
I'm going to try to give you just 2 points and be brief. Very challenging. So I do think that the way we build this system is changing the same way up to a certain extent that building any system changes, in the sense that, I think we are going to be pushed, and we're already doing this, and it's in our best interest to essentially use LLMs or that kind of technology, generative AI kind of technology, to extract from either conversations or data or data sets or whatever, information that we can use to build, that you can either automatically use to build decisions, or that we can curate to actually go and build decisions. So extracting a flow, extracting a bunch of rule sets, extracting a lookup model out of data, I think that's certainly key, as well as lowering for our end users, lowering the pain to use, or enhancing the pleasure to use, by letting them use your natural language to not just create things but modify things. Disable all the rules that touch PII. Boom, all the rules are disabled. That kind of stuff. So I think that's a path number one, and all the tool vendors throughout the technology landscape are doing that. I do think a second one, which again touches on what I said before, from my perspective, is that I do think that a lot of the flow type of approaches, where a process, if you want, in particular when it's a mix of process, of human process and automated things in the middle, as vendors, because it does give the end user significantly more. There are things that they're not going to be able to do, that need to be represented as flows, but there will be a lot of things where you are prejudging, the flows that they want to follow, when in reality LLM can do it. I think that from a technology perspective, in any of these cases, making sure you are not going to be able to do this with general models. So it's going to, you're going to take a model and you're going to fine tune it, most likely fine tune it. And to fine tune it, you need to be very careful on the data that you're using, and you need to be very careful on the reward system that you use. One of the things that makes general models really bad is that they cannot answer, I don't know. They are not rewarded in that sense. They are rewarded to answer. So which basically brings to hallucinations. They have to say something, so I might as well something that. So the reward system is actually quite complicated, and it's something that people need to work on. You need to monitor these models as much as you can, and you need to systematically track all the biases and the fairness. We touch on laws, and you said something about Canada. California, starting next week. You know, AB, I forgot what it is, 1018 or whatever, for human resources. You basically have to be able to prove for any decision that you do on human resources, you need to provide what's the list of variables that has the most impact on this. Now, if you're using an LLM, that's really tough.
Very hard to do, exactly,
So that's another aspect, and I shut up.
Yeah, all right. Guilhem. What's your thinking? What's the sort of, if you're going to pick one thing that you really feel like the sort of these AI tools are really going to change in how we build decision systems, what do you think it's going to be? What's the sort of, you know?
Well, Carlos said a lot that I agree with, but to me, the most important point is to help business people, guide them in extracting policies, document, and writing them into rules. Because let's face it, I mean, we've built decision models for years, and all of this team here has been around for ages. So it feels natural for us to structure a decision as a decision model, to write rules, decision tables, etc. But for a lot of business people, it's just hard. It's just difficult. They're struggling when they start, and they have this blank page, what I call the blank page syndrome, like a guy writing a book and not knowing when to start. It's difficult. And lowering the barrier of entry by using an LLM that's going to extract out policy and spit out a first draft of a decision model, of a data model, of rules and decision tables that go in there, that's really helpful. Now, we've done that, and as Carlos was saying, most vendors have done that. It's natural. We had a release recently just on that. And what becomes difficult next is to structure the decision model, because it tends to be relatively easy to generate a kind of flat decision model, and then a series of rules or series of decision tables that are, this is what I understood from your policy document. You have this rule, this rule, this rule. That's it, right? But to structure them in a way that's cohesive, that gives this functionality of a decision model, where all of these rules are related to computing this, and that's being consumed by another sub-decision elsewhere. That's much harder, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's where we need to. That's where we need to really invest the time to build tools that are more consumable for business people who are not developers, right? The goal is not to write the code. They don't care. They care about the system to automate the decision that's running their business. So to me, that's where we need to invest.
We had a great phrase from someone we were talking to who described how most decision systems have historically been built as a Plinko machine. You know, you drop something in and it goes ding, 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 ding through all these steps, right? And I think one of the problems is that most policies and most regulations are written the same way. They're written in this very linear way. So you can extract the details in this very linear stack, but turning it into a declarative model is what makes why it's a modeling exercise, right? And I think that's an interesting one. Yeah. All right, Stefaan, you're up next. How do you see this changing the way we build these systems?
I see the most advantage coming from what Guilhem has said about that white page, that blank page. If you start doing a decision modeling exercise, you need to talk with managers, with subject matter experts, etc. And for them, it is very difficult to come up with the right input that you need. And also, if you extract a lot from existing policies, etc., that's also rather tricky. It has nothing to do with AI or so, but a few years ago, I said governments or boards of directors or so, instead of writing policies and regulations. They should instead create decision models, test them, and then they know whether it will work or not, and then take a decision on, okay, this is the policy that we want to implement. Yeah, but I think
they don't. No.
But it will not be there as soon as possible. But that would be a great help. But I think it will speed up things, and it will also provide checklists of things you should not forget. Because if you know a business, then it's easy. You can just put together the right things. But if you're coming in as a decision modeler in an environment you do not know, and that should be possible, then LLMs and so can help you to know, okay, these are the aspects that play a role here, these are things I should not forget, etc., and to get really a relevant decision model.
All right. Gary, I'm sure you'll have some interesting take on this.
Just a couple of quick points. I mean, vibe coding, right? I don't know if you guys have tried that, these IDEs. I mean, they really do. It's amazing. I mean, it kind of makes you want to be a programmer again. And so, I think there's just a lot of, I mean, I don't know what the productivity is, but it's certainly factors and not percentage, right? I mean, it's truly astounding. But, what does that require? It really requires broad de facto standards. I mean, they're not, it's harder to vibe code, for example, a very well, unknown or not well publicized sort of language or formalism, right? So, Python, JSON, SQL, they just really hit that out of the park, and it really becomes fun again, So, to the extent that you can kind of target towards these standards, I think is great. And the point about, I don't know if you guys are the same as Oracle, but I think we've accumulated years of business knowledge since COVID in the form of Zoom videos. Right. So it's not just an issue of, going through PDFs and trying to bust those apart and harvest knowledge and turn those, into policies and business rules. I mean, we've got, key engineering decisions and, I don't know, kids these days, right? I mean, they don't write things down, it's just you post a video and you're done, And so, AI still has a lot of work to do, I think, to be able to go through, a Zoom video and take the 5 or 10% that's worth paying attention to and throwing out, the water cooler conversation that's not,
or watching someone actually do a task, right? Because you think about when we build decision models, we often watch somebody approve a claim, or we watch them approve a loan, right? And we sit next to them while they do this, right? Classic way to see how somebody does something. Well, if you videoed that, how good AIs are extracting that? Well, they're getting pretty good at taking notes. But to Gary's point, they're not really synthesizing anything out of that very intelligently yet, right? So,
yeah.
All right, great.
I'll cede my time.
Denis.
So I'll say one obvious thing and then one a little bit more controversial thing. So the obvious thing is, I still believe, and I've believed that for at least 30 years, that these intermediate artifacts that we build, the DMN models, the BPMN model, and the CMMN model, are absolutely needed and will continue to be absolutely needed as they stand as both human and machine readable knowledge gathering and capture. So I think that will remain. Now, to the idea of using LLMs or other techniques to extract, decisions, I would bluntly say the worst thing you can do is try to go from this to a system that automates that. There should be this intermediate artifact. And the more reason for that is that in the last 6 or 7 years, been doing a lot of work in regulated industries, laws, and healthcare. If you automate clinical guideline, you will automate contradictions, gaps, and confusions because they are left to the specialist to make interpretation. By definition, a law is left to interpretation. All laws should be left to interpretation by definition. And so therefore, if you try to go from any of these resources to an automated system directly, you're bound for the wall. Like, you're going to hit the wall fast. So I think we're on the right track with building these intermediate artifacts. Maybe we can get faster to the intermediate artifacts, and then maybe we can put better explanation of the intermediate artifacts. But I think these intermediate artifacts that are both machine and human readable are very, very important.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think certainly our experience is that the next policy document we find that is 100% complete as a definition of the policy will be the first, right? And this includes, like all of us on this call, some very, very anal retentive banks and insurance companies who still don't manage it, despite huge investments in trying to do so. Alan, you get to make the last comment, because I think we're almost out of time. So
you're all wrong.
Make it good.
Okay, just a little point about authoring. I don't want to go over, I agree with a lot of what's been said. But just to point out that authoring a decisioning system is very rarely simply a matter of modeling existing decision in an organization. What's normally happening is that you are designing a new business decision-making process. So there is nothing to copy, right? What you have is a group of people in a room arguing about how they want to conduct their business. And somebody has to sit down with them and turn that into a decision model.
Yes.
Right. Now, maybe in the future, an LLM can become an artificial business analyst, but I don't think they'll do as well as a real person sitting in the room. That's my prediction. I think we've got BAs for a long time to come. But leaving authoring, I'd actually like to think about the rest of the life cycle of a decisioning system, which we tend to ignore. And that's the maintenance and improvement of decisions over time. I've been working recently on how to use user-defined KPIs, which describe what they want to actually achieve in their business, to improve the decision-making capability of the system. And I think that there is quite a lot of scope for AI, for example, to provide a framework for informing users when KPIs are not behaving as they want them to, for suggesting possible changes to systems that might be able to improve it, for calling simulations or optimizations as appropriate to narrow down exactly what should be changed and so on. So I see AI being very useful as a framework for managing the ongoing maintenance and improvement of decision systems.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things I've often said to people is that, this is like, one of the big mistakes in decisioning is to worry about version 1. Yeah. And version 1 is almost never the version that matters. What matters is often, can you get from version 100 to version 101, right? And how easy is that? How effective is it? Who does it? Do you understand it? Can you tell what it's going to do before you make the change? All those kinds of questions. So I'm with you, Alan. I think we're just touching the surface of how we can use AI in that kind of, I've got an established decisioning system with a history and a bunch of records and multiple versions and all these things. Now what? Help me make the system better. I think that's a tremendously important opportunity for all of us.
Yeah, I think to do that, we need to... Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think that to do that, we need to, again, adopt existing human concept models. So business people are already familiar with the idea of a KPI for business as usual standard setting, and they're familiar with the concept of an OKR for aiming at a particular performance in the future. So I think our decisioning systems need to understand those two systems of measure and to allow decision systems to adapt to them.
Right. Carlos, you're going to say something.
No, I was going to say that's for me the number one thing in building any kind of decision. I completely agree with Alan. We don't even ask the question on, what are your rules? We say, how are you going to measure? So tell us first how you're going to measure the quality of your decisions, and then we can start talking about the models and stuff like that. I mean, that's number one.
Yeah, no, I think this is a really important thing, right? I mean, I think this is, you see this. I think this is one of the reasons we see such high failure rates in machine learning and AI and stuff, is because far too few people ask some of these questions before they start building these models, right? So.
But one point that Alan made that is very important too is that my experience has been, and as a company, our experience has been that the client organization that we work with get most of the benefit of the modeling exercise during the modeling. Like it's the extracting the implicit knowledge, getting people to agree on what's really going on. I mean, I've been in a meeting, and you all been in a meeting where somebody says, this is the way we do it. And the other person says, absolutely not.
Yeah, absolutely
and then the guy
exactly.
says, we've been doing it like this for 20 years.
Yeah.
And then the person is flabbergasted to find out that's the way it's been running for 20 years. So that exercise of getting people together, whether it's a process, a case, or a decision model, if we start using machines to create these models, we're losing a lot of the illustration that happens when we have all these people in the room. And that gives us really the nuance of that is proper to the organization, rather than only based on what's in the books or the history of trace.
No, it's a real challenge. This is a challenge I'm sure we've all seen too, when you have like standard decision models for things and frameworks and stuff like that. Is on the plus side, it gets you away from the empty page, it gets you going, it gets you started. And the downside is, one of the things that makes decision modeling so powerful is that ability to say, so how do you decide? And then capture what they tell you, right? And so there is a tension there between these things. I think Jacob is raising his hand because he's probably about to tell me we are out of time, which we are. So I would like to thank Alan, Denis, Gary, Stefaan, Guilhem, Carlos. Thank you for your time. As always,
no. Hold on,
James.
Actually, we try to schedule this time in such a way that we have unlimited time for this panel. So until you just completely tired, we're going to ask questions.
Yeah, some of us have day jobs. So
I want to translate questions of the last 2 days that I promised people would be addressed during this panel.
Okay.
And I believe this panel and the majority of people agree that when we're talking about generative AI, symbolic AI, we're not talking about replacement, we're talking about synergy. Everybody agree here. But it's interesting how much we can trust each technology, and in particular, it seems people agree that we can use generative AI to frame the problem, but we still will rely on symbolic AI, our traditional system, to solve the problem. And this sounds like common agreement, but still, yesterday it was very interesting presentation from one of the major vendors in this area, IBM, and the question what Pierre asked was, do we do LLM truly reasons, or it just simulate reasoning? And Tom Debois was not happy with negative answer and supported different point of view that we can trust with reasoning to this system. And Tom will present tomorrow, but I just wonder, what is your attitude? Can we trust generative AI with some decisioning, or it still should be in our hands?
Well, trust.
All I can do is simulate making decisions, or so I can only simulate reasoning. I can't really do
it. You could argue that your junior employees are only simulating doing the work because they have the knowledge from their school, but they have no knowledge of what your organization is doing, and therefore they're just simulating what they're doing. I think there's a gradient there, and we have to look at it and see in what context, what circumstance an answer is acceptable with a lot of variability, and other circumstances where there's no room for variability. So we tend to talk in black and white, but I certainly agree that if you want to discuss from a logic-based reasoning, as we know in traditional mathematical logic, LLMs do not reason the way we consider to be in a symbolic way. But then again, it's never been proven that we human reason in a symbolic way. So
yeah, right. I would say most, there's a lot of evidence that that we don't, right?
Indeed. We reason intuitively, we justify it symbolically. And what we've done over the last few hundred years is we've found ways of formalizing logic so that we know that we can make genuinely accurate, verifiable conclusions, and we've found ways to allow computers to execute those very efficiently. So why I can't remember, we made this point before, but why should we bother looking at LLMs to try to go through that whole process again?
Well, I just wanted to comment here is what I was attempting to say yesterday was to categorically say that any prompt that you provide, especially the newer models, 5.0 and 2.5, any prompt that you provide cannot be explained is not reality. It is, in fact, entirely possible to write prompts and provide them with data that will be explainable right now. And those explanations, and we'll see this tomorrow, right? So it's to say categorically that none of these decisions, I think, is not accurate at this point, or is debatable, right? So, such as using the point that an LLM can experience hallucinations, but we know already that there are many prompts that you can write that will not experience hallucinations. So I'm just objecting to the concept.
Well, I think I'm going to object to your statement there. Hallucination is inherent in the way a large language model works, because to Carlos's point, it must answer. And therefore, hallucination is not a bug; it's a feature.
Again, no, wrong. You ignored the premise of my analysis. I said that we are capable of writing prompts that will not experience hallucinations.
Well, not frequently, right? But they will.
Never.
No.
Deterministically, never.
Just turn up the temperature knob if your LLM has one, and you'll see that probably will fall apart.
But why would I put that into a system with a higher temperature? Why would I do that? Why? I'm asking.
You do it just to show what can happen, but it just means that it will happen once every 10 times instead of once every 100 times. Or once every 1,000 times, but set the temperature to zero.
I'm hearing a lot of low-level experience with actually using this stuff. That's my position. Good.
I think James disappeared.
Okay, James wrote that he has to go. So if you guys not too tired, we still can give everybody your final thought and share your opinion, and then this is one of the most interesting events, and what you said, it was really interesting to hear, and what the majority of experts think these days. But please, just I want you to make your final thoughts, share your final thoughts.
On what, Jacob? Precisely.
Just in general, for example, this is about synergy. That's what the majority people discuss, and synergy. And one of the most interesting questions, you already addressed this, how do you see, let's say, our decision intelligence platforms, different business rules, products, how something dramatically new you see in them in 3-4 years? Or maybe around this question.
I think the fundamental thing that's going to happen in this industry in the coming years is how we're going to address the legal challenges. Because, if you think about society in general, politics, etc., a law is there to protect a certain integrity in society and protect against unfairness and that kind of stuff. That's supposed to be the case. So cases are going to arise that will provoke, that will lead to the creation of laws. And those laws will need to be incorporated into the way we use things like LLMs. We'd had the same evolution when we started with predictive models, and neural nets. Nobody can explain a neural net. How can I do a decision based on neural net? Well, practically all decisions today have some sort of neural net somewhere. Well, I'm exaggerating, but a large number of them do. So I think that's going to be, and that world is moving. It's not a world that, I cannot, with a magic wand come here and say this is what's going to happen. I do not know what's going to happen, but what's certain is that there will be a significant amount of attempts, at least by governments, to set up legal boundaries to the usage of a system like an LLM in order to make decisions that are life-altering. And that's going to lead to changes in the way the industry reacts to this. Certainly going to slow down adoption of this kind of technology in enterprise situations, things that can be sued, for a lot of money. So I think that's going to be the biggest impact for adoption, if you want, moving forward. The technicalities of can it be, does it hallucinate a lot or not? I mean, we can make all sorts of philosophical arguments, like it always hallucinates, and sometimes the hallucinations are right, or we can say, it never hallucinates. It's a question of how you tune them, how the temperature you use, how much you tune them, how you reward the system. You can lower that. Exactly like with predictive models, you can lower the error rate, by basically being intelligent on the way you use it. So I think technology-wise, we will have the ability to adapt to the legislation of the usage of LLMs as a support technology in the broader decision management technology. I just don't know what those legal boundaries are going to be and how tough they're going to be to answer.
Okay, thanks.
But these legal boundaries do not only relate to artificial intelligence, they also relate to deterministic automation of decisioning.
Absolutely.
And also a lot they are about data, privacy and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The California law I referred to before defines an automated decision-making technology as anything that takes an input and processes it in a computer and returns an output. So
it's the same with the AI Act in the European community. It defines AI very broadly. So anything that has an algorithm is AI. Yeah.
I believe that as long as we're using AI as a tool, we're in a good area. It's when we start using AI as a performer that we have to worry about.
Yeah.
So we've been pretty good at, compiling different tools, predictive models, automations, calculation, graphic cards, all these tools, and leveraging them to a betterment. What's new in the possibility, we've been discussing it for 30 years, but now it seems we're closer to it, maybe like we were closer with the 5th generation project in the 80s. We're closer to an AI performer. And I think that's what brings all the questions and all the worries. And how should we treat an AI performer?
I would like to point out one thing also. We've talked about LLMs giving hallucinations a lot this past couple of days, but we need to not forget that symbolic AI is also giving hallucination, right? That is based on what's been set in terms of rules, decision tables, based on how the data is understood, a 0 is not a null, right? Or null meaning missing data, and maybe your table did not account for it and respond something stupid. We also have this problem. The only difference is that it's easier to debug it, right? Because we're engineers, we understand the code, and we can trace back to where it failed, go fix it, add a row in the decision table for a case we didn't cover properly, add a check on the input for avoiding nulls or whatever, right? Clean the data before we send it into the decision service, and all of a sudden we have a next iteration of the decision service that behaves better. So, I mean, we should be careful with, LMs hallucinate, so we need to be careful. Symbolic AI can also hallucinate. And it boils down to what I was saying earlier, is that we need to buy trust from the user by making the tooling to craft those decisions smarter, guiding the user more, and giving more the user the ability to test what's been done and reiterate over that, right? I think it's important to empower those business users with tooling that guides them through an interpretation of the policy that is good enough for the case, and that's auditable and that's understandable. So to me, that's an area of focus.
Yeah, I think one of the difference with the traditional models is that the LLMs are so damn good at misleading. I mean, when they give a wrong answer, they're so damn good at giving it in a way that makes you believe that it's good.
Right.
It takes a long time.
Suck you right into the rabbit hole with them if you're not careful. I've seen that.
It's like politicians.
I didn't want to make that comparison.
Okay, Gary, you want to make a final point?
Oh geez, I can make a couple of points. Will LLMs take our jobs? I don't know. Software engineers, if you can write 5 times more software with one person, will you need 5 times fewer people, or will you just, get 5 times more software? Maybe we need 10 times more software, and so we'll need still twice as many people. It's only been 3 years. It seems like a short time for humans, but maybe it's a long time for the computers, and as the software engineering capabilities, I mean, what have we done in those 3 years, right? It's primarily been a software engineering, loop, we kind of come up with version 1, we work on some things, we make it better, the context windows get bigger, the hardware improves, what happens when, the LLMs are so good at software engineering that they can essentially close that loop and come up with the next version themselves? And, even like people like Sam Altman are worried about things like this, right? I mean, that, there could be like that could make, this 3 years worth of progress, could happen in 3 hours, or 3 days, if you just apply all the power grid, to all of these server farms, and they're focused on just making themselves better, I mean, this might be able to happen to me. I don't know. We're living in, science fiction world. So there's optimism, but, there's extreme danger on the horizon as well, I think.
Okay. Thank you very much. I just want to make one comment that I have gut feelings that probably in 3-4 years, the term like generative AI will disappear. Probably people again would not like to use this word sentences that start with the word artificial, but our decision intelligence platform only will flourish because we need better decisions, and they will probably take a little bit different shape, but I'm quite optimistic about this future, and all reports from analysts, Forrester, Gartner, and actually from experts prove this point. And on this optimistic point, I want to tell thank you very much to our panel, and we will continue tomorrow. Thanks again.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Nice to see you again every year.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.